When most people think of Los Angeles, several neighborhoods come to mind. Hollywood, Westwood, South Central, Calabasas, Compton, Long Beach, and the list goes on. But there's one area you almost never hear about: San Pedro. It's so obscure that even people who've spent their whole lives in LA, like Adam 22, can't pronounce it correctly. But let me break it down for you. San Pedro is a small, almost isolated neighborhood at the very bottom of the city map. Technically, it's part of LA, but in reality, it feels like its own world. San Pedro is disconnected from the rest of the city. To get to Long Beach, you have to cross two bridges, and getting to the rest of LA requires driving through a giant oil refinery. It's almost like an island that everyone forgets about. The area is mostly residential and quiet, except for one small portion with a much darker history. To understand the dynamics of San Pedro, let's rewind to the 1940s during World War II. The US needed workers to build ships, so they set up shipyards on Terminal Island, just next to San Pedro. But there was a problem. San Pedro was a middle to upper class neighborhood, and most of the residents weren't keen on working in the shipyards. To fix this, the federal government demolished an entire neighborhood to build the Rancho San Pedro housing project. This project, which opened in 1942, housed temporary workers from places like Louisiana and Mississippi. But when the shipyard shut down in 1943, many of them became unemployed. The federal government handed over control of the area to the LA Housing Authority, and over time, Latino immigrants moved in, creating a unique and often volatile dynamic. Unlike other regions in California where these transitions were more seamless, San Pedro's evolution into a battleground for control was nothing short of explosive. As new immigrants flooded into the area and the need for security and dominance grew, the city's dynamics began to shift. The seemingly quiet residential neighborhood became an arena for power struggles, laying the groundwork for a fierce and long-lasting rivalry that would stain its streets for decades. By the early 1970s, a clear divide emerged, with two groups emerging as the primary enforcers of the neighborhood's complex hierarchy. The Dodge City Crips, founded in 1972, quickly expanded their territory, claiming the west side of San Pedro as their own. Originally a small crew, they grew steadily throughout the 70s, evolving from a tight-knit group of locals into a force to be reckoned with, swelling their numbers to several hundred members. Simultaneously, the San Pedro 13, also known as the Rancho San Pedro Locos, began to rise from the shadows. They were smaller at first, but their influence would soon eclipse that of the Dodge City Crips, especially as the 1980s unfolded. The San Pedro 13 had a different vibe, a rawness, and a willingness to go further than any gang had before. Their reputation was forged in bloodshed, and soon, their name was feared across Los Angeles. It wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about survival, about dominance, about proving who truly controlled San Pedro. The two factions, though initially avoiding direct conflict, were on a collision course that was inevitable. There was a simmering tension beneath the surface, with each group vying for control of the streets, the resources, and the respect that came with it. While it seemed like the gangs might be able to coexist, the inevitable rivalry was about to erupt. The simmering tensions between Dodge City and San Pedro 13 would reach a boiling point in the early 1990s, setting the stage for a decade of chaos. Prior to this, the two groups didn't see each other as mortal enemies. Instead, they had separate territories, and while their ideologies were different, they coexisted in a strange balance of uneasy peace. However, the peace was fragile, one that could be shattered in an instant. The fuse was lit in 1996 during a fateful barbecue in Rancho San Pedro. It was supposed to be a simple gathering, a moment of reprieve from the endless violence that had come to define the area. However, when a fight broke out between two men, it quickly escalated into something much darker. One of the Dodge City Crips was killed, And just like that, the unwritten rule of leaving each other alone was shattered forever. The next day, the San Pedro 13 responded with brutal efficiency. Retaliation was swift, and the balance of power in San Pedro shifted irrevocably. What followed was nothing short of a full-scale gang war. A war fought on the very streets where families once raised children and dreamed of a better life. The line between friend and foe became blurred as gang members began targeting anyone who was even remotely affiliated with the opposing side. The streets of San Pedro, once peaceful and quiet, became a battlefield where only the strongest would survive. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, the violence reached new heights in the summer of 2005. It was supposed to be a celebration, a late New Year's party thrown by a group of friends in San Pedro. The group wasn't involved in any gang activity, but one of the men had a tattoo in memory of a fallen friend from the Dodge City Crips. That simple detail would ignite a series of events that no one could have predicted. The man who had the tattoo was approached by another man at the party, Andy Trejo, who made it clear that he didn't like the deceased member of Dodge City. What started as a simple argument between strangers quickly escalated when Andy felt disrespected by one of the men who tried to smooth things over. What followed was a senseless act of violence that took the life of an innocent person, all because of a simple miscommunication about loyalty and honor. It was an instant flashpoint. What was once a minor dispute between two sides turned into a major escalation between factions. As the night wore on, the parties, which were supposed to be a respite from the violence, transformed into another battleground in the ongoing war. That random act of violence, that single moment of anger, became the symbol of how fragile peace could be in San Pedro. And in the aftermath, many would pay the ultimate price. By 2007, Dodge City Crips found themselves at a crossroads. They had been battered by internal struggles, government crackdowns, and the relentless advance of San Pedro 13. The federal government had taken notice of Dodge City's growing influence in illicit activities, particularly their operations in Ohio. What started as a seemingly innocent connection to a small town would turn into the undoing of Dodge City. Their underground delivery service, as lucrative as it was, caught the attention of authorities when one suspicious package led to a massive investigation that spanned multiple states. The result? In 2005, 20 members of Dodge City were arrested. They had been living in the shadows for years, but the feds were now on their tail. The group was dismantled, and one of their leaders, Clarence Remble, received a life sentence in 2006. Dodge City, once the dominant force in San Pedro, was effectively gone by the end of that year. The San Pedro 13, having vanquished their rivals, gained full control of the area. But their victory was bittersweet. The violence, the deaths, the bloodshed, it was all part of a cycle that was far from over. With Dodge City's decline, a new chapter began in San Pedro's gang history. Unique Remble, the son of a former Dodge City member, rose to prominence in the aftermath of his father's incarceration. Born in San Pedro but raised in Compton and South Central, Unique carved his path in the world of rap music. His raw lyrics, sophisticated style, and deep connection to the streets caught the attention of major names in the industry. He became the voice of a generation who had lived through the chaos of San Pedro, channeling that pain into his music. However, even the music world was not immune to the tensions that had defined the streets. Remble's ties to the Stink Team, a collective of LA-based rappers, would soon be tested when he failed to attend the funeral of the group's beloved member, Draco the Ruler. What followed was a series of diss tracks that would elevate the drama surrounding San Pedro to new heights. Even in the world of rap, rivalries were still very much alive. Remble's rise to fame would be marred by the same battles that had once raged on the streets. His loyalty would be questioned, and his place in the rap game would be forever tied to the streets of San Pedro. The tale of San Pedro is one of unrelenting violence, complicated loyalties, and the ever-present need to assert dominance. It's a place where people live in the shadow of their history, where every block tells a story of conflict, survival, and tragedy. Even as the years go by, the cycle continues. The names change, the faces change, but the rivalry and the bloodshed persist, a dark reminder of the forces that shaped San Pedro's streets. And as long as the legacy of violence endures, the streets of San Pedro will never truly forget. That concludes today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're alerted whenever a new video drops. It's completely free and helps out the channel tremendously. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.